Hey guys, Nour here, and today I just wanted to talk to you about how not to feel discouraged when your writing feels predictable. I know from personal experience that when I write a story and then I go back to it later and read it, sometimes it sounds so predictable and I worry that my readers will be bored or they'll think it's so easy to find out who the antagonist is or how the story is going to end, and that makes me anxious when I read my story. However, I've learned over the years that that's okay. Us writers always or almost always feel that our writing is predictable. That's because we are the ones writing our story and we are the first people to read it. Of course, when you read it, you already know what's going to happen. So it will feel predictable. This often makes us feel discouraged to write, as if we're not real writers, and we wonder, how do other writers create such fabulous stories when our own story is bad and it's predictable and no one's going to read it and get excited because they're gonna know how it's going to end from the very first chapter, right? But that's not really the case. Just because we know the ending does not mean that other people know the ending. And if you write out a great story and you plan out a great conflict and a great climax with really well-rounded characters, you shouldn't have an issue. Plus, don't forget that you will always have to do many revisions after your first draft. The first draft is not your final story. It's only the beginning. And no one other than you and maybe a few trusted readers have to read your first draft for a critique. You are in charge of your story, and once you revise it and revise it and revise it and then send it to an editor, you are going to have a brilliant story if you worked on it the right way. I know when I personally read my stories, I get anxious because I worry that other readers will get bored and feel that my story is predictable. That is totally normal. I've learned to accept that. It will always feel that way because, again, like I said, I'm the one who wrote the story, so I already know what's going to happen. And my readers will not feel that way. It's not the same for them. They don't know what's going to happen. And if I worked on it really hard, then it's going to be fine. And the same thing applies to you. Don't worry, your first draft is just your first draft. Even if you read your story and feel it's predictable, it's not if you worked on it. Don't worry. Just let go of that feeling and know that everybody else will not think that way. Something else to keep in mind is that every story has a formula, so there is always a level of predictability. For example, most of us are aware that a climax happens towards the end of the story. Therefore, we're aware that something is about to go down towards the end of the story. So we are predicting that to happen. And that's fine. The reader expects this. Even though it's a little bit predictable, that's totally okay. You don't need to surprise your reader at every turn in your writing. It's okay if they are aware of what you're trying to do, because that's just normal. For example, when we watch a movie, especially something like a horror movie, we're aware that something is going to happen, that the bad guy is gonna come out with a knife and stab a lot of characters. We know this is going to happen, and that's part of the watching experience. In fact, they even play horror music to let us know when something is right around the corner or when a character is sitting around and something is about to pop out of nowhere. This is an expectation we have, and we are completely okay with it, and so will your reader when he reads your story. Just because you think something is predictable in your writing does not mean that your reader will. And if they do, it is because it is part of that formula and they are expecting it, just as you expect other things to happen in somebody else's book. I mean, how often do we read somebody else's work and we're like, oh, I think I know who the antagonist is. I think I know which one of these characters is the real killer behind this crime scene. We often make guesses because that's what the formula is entailing. There's somebody bad in your story, and of course they're going to do something, and the reader is going to pick up on that and try to guess or even predict who it is. Like I said, nothing needs to be surprising 100% of the time. I encourage you to write your story, your entire story, before you read it. In fact, I want you to not read it for several weeks after you write it. Wait at least 2 to 3 weeks, because that will help you forget a little bit about your own story. And then when you read it, you'll discover whether or not it is 100% predictable or just predictable enough for your reader to enjoy it. I believe it was Stephen King who said that a writer should put their work aside for a few weeks and then come back to it later with fresh eyes. And that's because when we look at it right after writing, we are still with all those ideas in our head, and it's hard to separate that from the writing experience or the reading experience. We start worrying about it and we see how predictable it is, when in fact it's really not that predictable, and it's only predictable because we've written it. Another way to ease your mind about whether your story is predictable is to have somebody read it. You know, have a trusted reader, a beta reader, a critique partner go through it and tell you if it is predictable. Have them write down anything that they think is easily solved or that they've easily expected to happen, and then if that's happening throughout the story, you have your answer and you could make changes. But more often than not, they will tell you how shocked they were about a plot twist or an incident that occurred. So don't be discouraged. Have them help you out. You will be so surprised by your reader's reaction when they're actually excited by the story. Like I said though, you have to write quality work for that to occur. So if you write a first draft and send it off, sometimes you might not get the response that you wanted. People might say, oh, but something's lacking here. This plot twist isn't really working. You have a plot hole. So make sure you do send it to your critique partner after you've gone through a few revisions yourself. But do leave some time from the time you write to the time you read it so that you can judge it with fresh eyes. And know that you're not alone. Every writer who's ever written an entire novel has probably felt this way. I know I always feel that way with every book I write, and I wonder how people are going to take it. But you know what? I've been so surprised every time I write a book and work hard on it, and my readers give me a great response. I know that I did fine, and probably more than fine, and that my writing isn't as predictable as I thought it was, and that's pretty normal with any writer. I hope this clears your conscience a little and helps you write more freely. I don't want you to stress about writing because it's supposed to be fun, even though it is stressful at times. If you ask any writer, they will tell you the same thing. It happens, it's normal, and it will continue happening throughout the rest of your writing career, and that is fine. As long as you realize that, you are going to write and write and write, and it's gonna be great. So I hope this video helps you out a little bit and clears your mind from that anxiety and allows you to just continue writing freely without that stress. I would love to know though, have you recently felt this way? Let me know in the comments because I'm really curious, and let me know how you dealt with this feeling. Also, I encourage you to connect with writers right here on YouTube. In fact, there are so many writers right here on my channel commenting, so be sure to connect with them because I'm sure all of you feel the same way at one point or another. So communicate with each other, help each other out, and of course I will join the conversation and share my own thoughts with you guys. So there you have it, how to not feel discouraged when your writing feels predictable. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, check out my others, and subscribe. And remember, Nour for President!